So I actually wanted to make this video during the international break. Club football's not on. Nobody really watches the national games, so I figured that was a better time to put it out. But in my head, I'm like, this video, I wanted to put it out after seeing just one more game at Barca. I wanted to see how we'd fare against Girona today after the back-to-back losses against PSG and Sevilla, and in the manner and how it happened too. I figured I might as well just wait for one more game just after the international break, just to kind of see where we are and my thoughts exactly. Because obviously going into this game specifically, we needed 3 points. And the manner and how it happened was obviously so dramatic, but obviously the international break has not been kind to us. We've suffered so many injuries from, all parts of the pitch. Coming in from the international break, we'd see a very different squad in terms of our regular lineup. Luckily, we got a couple players back, like Balde, like Yamal on the bench, obviously Fermin's back too. So we had a couple key players that are starting to come back, but they're still not fully fit. You could tell today by the way we played, half of these guys that are back, they're like nowhere near 100%. And it kind of showed today in the performance too. I'm going to quickly go over, I don't want to make the match review of this so long because there are other components of this video I want to talk about that are more important in my opinion. But just like a quick gist on how I think we did today. I thought it was an okay game. It was very weird, to be honest. Like, there's a reason I didn't have a separate video about the whole match review on it, because I found today's game to be very, very weird. Just like in the way we played in the first half, especially how we were set up in the second half when obviously chasing the winner. There's still a lot of work for this team to do. And unfortunately, because we have such major injuries to our front line, it does affect the way we play. It's not an excuse. It's like any other team that have big injuries to their attacking forwards. It does make a big difference in how the team plays, especially in Flick's system, which I'll get to later. In the first 15 minutes, I thought we were great. I thought, we really looked refreshed, moving the ball quick, high press. And that's how we got the first goal. Pedri, that goal was just beautiful. It was just a beautiful, beautiful goal. He passed it into the net. It was just amazing. The performance after the 15th minute was just like before the international break. Giving loose balls away, players kind of just not doing what they're supposed to do in terms of pressing. To put it into better words, we were just complacent. We gave sloppy passes away. We kind of ran into trouble when we didn't need to. And Girona had like about 3 opportunities where they could have scored. And it was one of those classic ball in behind, through on goal, 1-on-1. 2 of them they just completely missed. I think one of them hit the post. And then Szczesny saved one of them, which was a great save. And I think, to be fair, I think that one was offside. But it was night and day for Girona. They could have gone into the dressing room at halftime 3-1 up easily. I think if we go to the stats here, we could see, they had 3 big chances in that first half, which is crazy. They should have been up in that first half. But that second half, we absolutely dominated. We battered them in terms of possession. They didn't sniff a chance. Literally, they didn't do anything in our half. We played a lot better in terms of a possession game in that second half. But again, we just lacked that cutting edge in front of goal. And that's just down to our attack not being our attack. And Lamine and Pedri, came off, I think in the 60th minute, if I'm not mistaken. And to be honest, when I saw them get taken off, I'm like, okay, this is a big risk. But luckily, we managed to get over the line through a last-minute winner from Araujo, who Flick actually put on as a box threat striker. And it'd be so odd because you'd see Rashford and Araujo just press together, and it'd be like a fever dream, to be honest. But it was funny, but I'm glad it worked out because it was an ugly, lucky win. But I'm glad that, we kind of got over the line and got the 3 points, because in the end, that's what matters. That's what people are going to remember. But there are more pressing matters I kind of wanted to talk about in this video. And it has to do largely with Hansi Flick's high line and kind of the noise around it. Barca fans talking a lot on social media, rival fans talking a lot on social media about the high line, how it's getting exposed left, right, and center. I think that with every story, there's context. There's context that needs to be delivered. Because obviously there's a reason as to why we're getting exposed from the back line. There's a reason as to why we're not playing our usual fluid, effective football that we saw last season, which brought us so much success. So what I've done is I've spent the last about hour or so in my own time studying Hansi Flick's high line and kind of understanding the key components and what makes it so successful, and kind of using that to compare how Barca are doing this season. Yes, I know I'm the biggest nerd of all time, but that's what I've been doing for the last hour. So I've realized something. So if we go over here, Hansi Flick obviously took over at Bayern in November from Niko Kovac. Obviously did incredible in that first season. Won the treble, won the sextuple. Literally won everything with Bayern that he could have possibly won in the first season. And it was amazing. because he brought a new style of football, similar to what we saw last season at Barca. He kind of surprised everyone. Nobody really knew how to play against that high line, and he got Bayern over the line. Obviously, it was a famous win in the Champions League, famous, season for Bayern. They won 33 out of his 36 games in charge, which is an incredible record. Now, that system largely had to do with the players he had at Bayern and the players he had at his disposal. As you can see here, this was the lineup that was put out in the Champions League final against PSG. It was 1-0 in the end. Coman got the goal, for those who don't remember. But there's something I noticed a lot, and it had to do specifically with the back line. So this back four, Davies, Alaba, Boateng, and Kimmich, had actually been the same back four for all the big games in all competitions for Bayern that season. So Flick's system largely depended on the fact that back four would stay consistent throughout the whole season. And if you can draw some similarities between Bayern and Barca last season, is that we ourselves had a very similar case in terms that we stuck with the same back four in our biggest games last season. So for example, against Bayern, we had Balde, Inigo, Kubarsi, and Koundé. Against Real, we had Balde, Inigo, Kubarsi, and Koundé. We saw that against, obviously, Atleti. We saw that against Benfica. We saw that against Dortmund. It'd be the same back four in all our biggest games last season. And that largely has to do with the cohesion of the back line. Obviously, if you stick with the same back four, they're going to understand each and every single one of their roles perfectly. They're going to obviously understand each other's chemistry and their movements, which obviously leads to more backline success. And that's exactly what we saw towards the latter half of the season. So going off that defensive point, this season under Flick, our backline has changed about 4 or 5 times. I can just name 3 different combinations at the top of my head. We saw so many different combinations in our back line, and we never really stuck, and we still haven't really stuck to a constant 4 at the back, which is obviously hindering our cohesion at the back. And that's why we're all obviously giving so much space in behind, because this system really does rely on you understanding the other defenders on the team's positioning when out of possession. Now, obviously that's just down to Flick and his decisions, and he hasn't really found a consistent 4. Now that's obviously down to Inigo's departure during the summer, and we haven't really been able to replace him. And I do think that's largely due to Deco and his recruitment ability. We haven't really been able to replace one of our most effective defenders last season, or our best defender last season. So it's obviously paying a big price right now, because he was a leader in that back line. He was the one who was the general, kind of dictating. He was the unsung hero, we could call him, for the majority of last season. And obviously him not being in the squad currently is detrimental, and we could see his absence is obviously causing a big miss. So I do think that's not largely down to Flick. It's just more so in the recruitment part. Flick really hasn't been given the keys in terms of players at his disposal to choose from. And obviously there's a reason he keeps changing out Eric Garcia, Kubarsi. Like, there's obviously different combinations. There's a reason he keeps doing that, because he hasn't found 2 center-back pairings that are like consistently as good as Inigo was and Kubarsi was last season. The second point in terms of why Flick's system works so well is because there's effective pressing and positioning, which obviously starts from the attacking front line. So, I mean, this picture's not great to show, but just imagine it if you're watching it on TV. You could see that we kind of implemented a man-to-man press. So Lewandowski, Rafinha, Yamal, they'd obviously stick to one defender to kind of press and constantly, close down and man mark. And it worked so well last season. And unfortunately this season, now of course this season hasn't been the case, because we've obviously switched out that front line so many times, whether it be Rashford up top, whether it be Farran up top, whether it be Rashford on the left, you were Rafinha in like the 10 position, Yamal on the right. It'd be like a constant change in our attacking front line. So obviously our pressing isn't going to be so effective when our front line keeps switching. Our front 4 of Yamal, Rafinha, Lewa, and Olmo will also be unchanged in the biggest games last season. Obviously Firmino and Olmo will kind of be interchanging whenever Olmo would be injured, but for the large parts of last season, Olmo was our go-to number 10 because he was playing so well. So our pressing with them last season was so effective and so reliant on the fact that we were able to carve so many opportunities out of their pressing and how we won the ball so high up the pitch. Similar to Bayern, if we go back to this image, this attacking 4, obviously you'd see Goretzka sometimes play in the Muller position, but this front 4, they'd press so effectively to the point where these 2 at the back, Thiago and Goretzka, they'd obviously do the Frankie and De Jong roles and kind of just controlling and dictating the tempo of the play. And Goretzka was obviously more of like the muscle and physicality side of Bayern that season, and Thiago and Kimmich actually were the ones who really controlled it when they had the ball. That brings me to my point about how our attack has been changing so much this season. So again, there's no cohesion in the press. I mean, Rashford today, I thought he had a decent game, but you'd often see that he kind of second guess himself when pressing. And with pressing like that, you can't second guess, because if you give opponents space, in these areas, when you don't press effectively, it's just a piece of cake for them when playing balls in behind. And we saw that against Sevilla. We saw that against PSG in that second half, which was woeful. We saw that against Rayo, I think in that 1-1 draw. And let's be honest, we saw that against Levante too. So there are many examples of how we don't press effectively in the season that have brought us so much consequence. I think that's a big, comparison to make from last season, because last season we obviously kind of stick to like one systematic way of playing and it worked so well for us. And obviously we've been hit with injuries, which isn't ideal. And Bayern also suffered major injuries in their second season under Flick, which ultimately affected them in not winning the Champions League again. People have this like notion of second season under Flick. It doesn't work out so well, which is true. I can understand that, but Bayern still won the Bundesliga. They still won the Super Cup. They got knocked out on penalties in the Pokal, from what I remember, and they lost in the Champions League to PSG in the quarterfinal, which isn't like terrible. So it's not like Flick went trophyless in the second season at Bayern. He was still good. He was still a great manager. They just got hit with unfortunate injuries. They lost a key player in Thiago. Obviously, for them to repeat the sextuple 2 seasons in a row, which has never been done in football, is such a high standard. So it has to do with context as well. And we can see that context in this season because Flick hasn't been given a squad to work with. It's the same squad as last year with Rashford on loan and Juan Garcia, who's again injured too, which is also a big point, which I forgot to make before. But so I do think that the reasons that I pointed out here in terms of why we're playing the way we're playing under Flick right now has to do with context. It has to do with obviously our injuries. It has to do with our ineffective pressing, has to do with our backline, constantly changing. There are a lot of components as to why we're not playing correctly at the moment. Even though, it's not been a terrible start to the season. We just lost 2 games. We've lost 1 game in the league and 1 game in the Champions League. Last season, for those who remember, we went a full month without winning a single game in La Liga and the Champions League under Flick. So if we're being honest, we've been in a worse situation in terms of results. But as a squad right now, this is like an all-time low because we have so many players out, so many key players out. So I do think that once we get back to full fitness, we're going to see some sort of consistency in the way we play. Because when those players are back, obviously we're going to go back to our usual pressing method. We're going to go back to our usual consistency of doing that. And hopefully when they're back too, we can start converting our chances properly. Because in the end, guys, this is a high risk, high reward system. If you don't convert your chances, you're going to get punished for it because you're giving so many chances away. It's kind of a punch for punch football. You score 4, I score 5. You score 5, I score 6. It's that type of football under Flick. Hopefully when Rafinha, Lewa, when Lamin's fully fit again, when Fermin's fully fit again, almost fully fit again, Farron's fully fit again. I can just keep going in names, but I will say this one last thing before I end the video. If we do see this consistency of injuries, we don't obviously have our first 11 at all times throughout the season. Something I will say is that I do want to see some sort of adaptation plan from Flick. I don't want it to be super pragmatic and stubborn on the high line when we don't have a consistent back four, or our attacking forwards are not pressing correctly, or we're not controlling games like how we want to. I do want to see some sort of change, whether that be dropping the line deeper. I do want to see some sort of change in terms of how we approach games. And the reason I'm saying that is because we have a huge game next week, against Real. Where obviously in last season, we dominated them in all 4 games. So I do want to see some sort of approach where, okay, if we're not pressing effectively, can we see some sort of adaptation or change? Is there a plan B? Is there a plan C? If things aren't going our way, like how it did in that second half against PSG, can we see some sort of change? Can we see the game out? Can we see some sort of safe option? Because let's be honest, we did see the line kind of dropped in 2 games this season from what I remember. Against Newcastle, we saw the line drop a little bit. We saw Araujo and Kubarsi really get stuck in and winning duels in the box. For the majority of that game, we saw the line drop slightly. And it worked out in our favor because we actually had so much control in that second half. It wasn't obviously our best football, but we had so much control in that second half. And obviously Rashford had those 2 amazing goals. But we saw some different side to the highline system and it worked in our favor. So I think going forward, if these injuries actually end up being consistent, I do want to see some sort of plan B. I'm not saying abandon the high line. I just want to see some sort of adaptability. That's all. This whole agenda against Flick of abandoning the high line, we should never do it again. It's not working in our favor because we lost an ego. I don't believe that yet. I'm completely against that. I'm backing him. I think what he's doing and what he has been doing is remarkable. with the squad we currently have. We kind of have to give him some leeway after that performance last season. After overperforming last season with the squad we had, like, we kind of have to give him some leeway, because in the end, he's also learning still about the players in the squad. He's obviously brought up so many players from the academy. I mean, the average age on this bench alone is like younger than I am. So, I mean, there's only so much we can do with the players we have. So those are the key points I kind of wanted to make about the truth regarding Hansi Flick's High Line, you know, the components behind it, what makes it successful, what makes it unsuccessful. I do think that it is still October. It's still very early. So there's a long way to go for the season ahead. In terms of the fan base, we're being so overreactionary right now, in my opinion. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Bit of a longer video today, I know, but I kind of wanted to go in depth in what I think in regards to this High Line. So leave a like, subscribe, follow all the socials. If you guys have been keeping up with TikTok, I've been appreciating the support, reels as well on Instagram. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.